It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce the newest program on Crowdsource The Truth with my newest co-host, Tiffany FitzHenry. We're going to bum rush Hollywood here. How are you, Tiffany?
Great, how are you?
I'm doing really well. I think you're getting a call already. People are really jumping out of their skin over what you've been doing for the past several months. You and I have been working together for maybe over a year. I've had the pleasure of meeting you and your husband. You guys are just so great in every way. You've got your head screwed on straighter than almost anybody I've ever met. And you've been revealing things about Hollywood that are shocking to some. Most recently, you did a massive expose on a guy who I used to think was pretty cool. I used to watch his movies, that he was funny. Looks like he's having fun with Brad Pitt and Danny DeVito, drinking booze and limoncello, hot women all over the place. But it turns out George Clooney may in fact be a deep state scumbag. He is, as a matter of fact.
It certainly seems like it. I mean, when you go down the rabbit hole of his career only, just look at his movies, you can see his foray into this world that we're now just learning about through the Epstein unsealed documents, this world that's been over top of our world that we didn't know existed.
Yeah.
He's a big part of that.
He is.
Yeah.
And you knew it existed. A lot of people out there didn't. So I have to thank you for creating this show with me, Tiffany. And I want to remind everyone that it's really important, whether people are watching on YouTube or Facebook or Periscope or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's super important for people to go to Tiffany's Patreon page and sponsor her. You can find it at patreon.com/Tiffany FitzHenry. You can also visit Tiffany's free website, tiffanyfitzhenry.com, and it's really important that people sponsor Tiffany and support her work, because we've heard so much about how a really small collection of companies control all the media in the United States of America, and these gigantic corporations control advertising on YouTube and Google and elsewhere. So we can't bring you this kind of information and keep it going in a sustainable kind of way without your support. So please visit Tiffany's sites and become a patron of hers. You know, you can also watch on YouTube at the Tiffany FitzHenry channel. We are doing a simulcast today of this first broadcast of Bum Rush Hollywood, and you've assembled a ton of new information for us, Tiffany. What have you got for us?
There's been a lot coming out this week. It's the veil's being lifted, and it's being lifted in a huge way. We're just watching all of these people like George Clooney, but people like Harrison Ford kind of reveal, not kind of, but majorly reveal themselves to us to say, this is who I am, this is who I work for, and yeah, I've been in all these movies. You know, Harrison Ford, for example, so many of his movies, I went back and looked yesterday, were movies that had Pentagon involvement.
Oh yeah.
Were, you know, Hollywood government productions. It was Patriots Game, Indiana Jones, Random Hearts, Air Force One, and Clear and Present Danger, just to name a few that I got right away just from searching.
Indiana Jones, you know, that's surprising.
Yeah, made in conjunction with the Pentagon. I think that we would be really surprised to know how much of our world has been absolutely orchestrated and absolutely has been a propaganda, you know, just ruse in a very, very constructed way that we were completely unaware of. These ideas that have been put into our minds through people like this, through movies that they're in. It's I guess I think it's like crimes against humanity, personally.
Tiffany, you know, I'm looking at this picture of the Oscar that you've got on tiffanyfitzhenry.com right next to your really awesome article about Harrison Ford, who I'm disappointed to learn is potentially a deep state stooge. I remember that there was a long period of time where Leonardo DiCaprio, they made a big deal out of the fact that he hadn't won an Oscar, and now of course he has. I wonder if the Oscar is not held out as an award that is only bestowed upon those who cooperate, because it seems like it.
Well, it's funny, I didn't necessarily put that together until I started on this Clooney deep dive. And it was so clear. You could see his career, you could see his career trajectory, but then if you were also charting his extracurricular activities, right? The movies he was making, but also what he was doing out in the world. In 2006, when he made Syriana, it was the same year he also really got in bed with Barack Obama and started touting him and basically putting it out there that he should be president. This is a one-term senator at the time, 2 years before he becomes president. So you can really start to see that maybe these awards have something to do with playing the game that is this global game that we don't realize all these people are playing.
Absolutely. I mean, the Nobel Peace Prize seems to be another one of these type of things that they reward the deep state stooges with. Barack Obama famously won a Nobel Peace Prize, I think, while he was president-elect, or certainly prior to his war-filled presidency of bombing people all over the place. I don't know why they would give him the Nobel Peace Prize. You know, I meant to scan this and have it ready to show you, Tiffany, but I actually had been submitted to AMPAS for a technical Academy Award for development that I created having to do with 3D cameras. And despite the fact that that optical element has been used around the world in virtually every 3D movie made since like 2010, the Academy did not want to give me anything. So.
Yeah, you can find my name on Oscars.com as well. People don't know this about me, but I had two of my screenplays at one time went to the top of, they have a competition for screenplays. Mm-hmm. And two of mine are at the same time in 2013 or 2012 at the top of the Nichols, which is their competition for screenplays. But yeah, I mean, but did I go as far as, you know, getting a real Oscar? No, I think you have to sell your soul for that. Right. Do you know what I mean? I really think these things and these, you can also look at, right when he first got started, he was getting nominated for Golden Globes and Emmys. And it was at the same time, now we know, all of this stuff was going on the set of ER. We have multiple people coming out and saying George Clooney particularly was basically covering up this whole cult of sex abuse that was going on the set of ER.
Oh, and ER, right.
Okay. On the set of ER.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that was his first show, right?
Yeah, and that's when he started getting nominated for things, and then he started winning. I mean, and I really think through him particularly, we can just use him as a case study of this thing that these celebrities are, particularly these celebrity actor activists telling us who to vote for kind of celebrities, which now suddenly is like all of them.
Right. Yeah, why do we care what Taylor Swift thinks about politics?
Well, and when did all this really happen, right? This was like smacked us in the face in 2016.
Yeah.
It was just suddenly and all at once, like a bunch of drones, like programmed drones, they all just turned like they're one bot and just started all telling us who to vote for in unison. It was just so weird. And I remember thinking back, it's really strange that all of these artists would have the exact same opinions. This is just almost probably like statistically impossible. You know, I was thinking at the time, 2015, 2016, before I came out and have started doing what I'm doing.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, statistically impossible.
Well, I think a lot of it also is peer pressure. People who maybe aren't directly influenced, like I'm sure, like I do, you still have friends who are there in Hollywood, in the industry, and they're probably, I'm guessing now, you haven't told me this, but they're like, hey, I've been watching what you've been tweeting about. And I was like, you're a little bit going crazy. You're like, what's up, right? I mean, what's your interaction with your friends who remain in Hollywood like these days?
Well, I know that people in Hollywood are reading what I'm doing. People like Roseanne have told me as much, and it is making a big impact. And they're watching and they're on notice. And it's more or less like everybody there knows that they're there by the skin of their teeth. They're there. They've had to fight and scrap to be there. They've had to do a lot of things to get there. And they don't want to lose their place. Well, that's not how storytelling should work. And that's not how art should work. And that's not how any of this should work. And the fact that they would rather keep their place than come stand a post with me says volumes. It speaks volumes. And there are a lot who have reached out and who are saying, I'm right there with you. Yeah, let's build, let's do, let's leave this all behind. And I think you guys are going to start to find out a lot more who those people are coming up soon.
Well, Tiffany, isn't it? I mean, you're essentially a Hollywood whistleblower. You're someone who has said, you know what, instead of doing things that I find morally objectionable in order to gain money and influence in the industry and comfort for myself, I'm going to stand up and talk about what's right. So that makes you a whistleblower. We're hearing a lot about whistleblowers today from idiots like Adam Schiff. But when you look at actual whistleblowers like you and Roseanne Barr, Roseanne lost her show. She was smeared in the public, in the press and all that. I mean, the number of people who were working on that show who lost their jobs as a result of somebody trying to attack Roseanne is pretty sad, because most of those people are just regular people trying to do a job. But Roseanne has basically been totally minimized for speaking out in the way you have, and I think a lot of people are rightly afraid of that. Now, I can't tell other people what to do with their lives. For me, I've chosen to put myself out on a limb. You've chosen to put yourself out on a limb. We can't really criticize people who aren't in the place to do that. But then again, at the same time, if everybody, what's that saying about evil only prevails when good people do nothing?
Something like that. Right. I mean, I'm not in a place to be doing what I'm doing. And about Roseanne, Roseanne's going to come back with a vengeance. I'm here to I'll go right out on a line and make that prediction, because she has an incredible story to tell. And when the time's right, she will tell that story. And she's really absolutely going to come out back from this. You think about what she had, right? The best ratings of any network show in like a decade or more. And that show was taken off the air. And it was really taken off the air for a lot of really interesting reasons, none of which are the reasons that really made it out into the press. Her story is really interesting, and she's going to come back in a big way, in a huge way. So people can look forward to that, because that I know.
We'll look forward to that for sure. So actually, Roseanne is a fan of David Hawkins. She's tweeted some David Hawkins episodes, and that's going to come into play a little bit in a moment here. Why don't you tell us a bit, Tiffany, about this? I didn't know anything about this until you brought it to our attention in the last show that we did, but George Clooney has been very busy with stuff. What is George Clooney's role here with Sudan?
What we're told, it's a lot like what we're told about what Angelina Jolie does. We're told that he's all about humanitarianism, and he wants to make it so that these countries, I don't know, he seems to say that his efforts are all humanitarian based, but I happen to know that the South Sudan government doesn't want him there. That I know for a fact. That they just came out today denouncing him and his NGO, the Sentry. That's the government of South Sudan. So I don't quite know what George Clooney thinks he's doing in South Sudan. When, the brand new government there, they just became independent in 2011.
Huh.
These are the people who he's saying, this brand new government, he's saying these people are all corrupt. But here's the thing. Who does George Clooney work for? That's what we need to constantly go back to. He's been making movies for the CIA for the last decade. So who does George Clooney work for? That's what we need to look at. And it's a complicated issue, what's going on in Africa, what's going on in Sudan, what's going on in Darfur. These are complicated issues, but the West coming in and doing what the West has always done, we we've been alive long enough and we have enough history and we have the internet now, we can see the track record of those things. And so a lot of people will say George Clooney is, well, not just a lot of people say, his NGOs are basically being funded by the military industrial complex, these think tanks that we all know, and we know what they've been doing for the last 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. So who George Clooney is being propped up by in Africa, George is that, like, he's like that shiny object that they send out there to go, look, this is what we're doing is good. Humanitarianism. Woo-hoo. And it's like, oh, okay. And then rape and pillage. And these countries have no voice. These people have no voice. I've been reached out to by more people from Africa, from Sudan, from South Sudan, just thanking me for giving a voice. Because when you've got George Clooney over here,
Right.
it's like everything else gets drowned out.
Right.
And they really want to tell their story about what they want for their country. And it's interesting. This is the same garbage that we've been falling for, particularly here in America, because they use these celebrities and then we consent to all of it because, well, Angelina Jolie thinks it's a good idea, so must be. And then these NGOs get away with so much in these countries that they go in there under the guise of one thing and they're doing something else. We're really just starting to understand all this, I think.
Yeah. And it's in large part because of reporting coming from people like you. You said something very important. You said that George Clooney is there and he's drowning out sort of what you're saying and the message that you want to put out. You know, when I was dealing with my work in Hollywood, and even now, you know, digital cameras and all this, one of the considerations that we have is this concept of signal to noise ratio. And people who are old enough to remember TVs with rabbit ears, you'd get interference, you'd wiggle that thing around until you got good reception, and all that static and noise would clear out, and you'd have a clear picture, you'd have a clear signal. So the more noise there is, the less signal you're gonna get. And there's a well-known tactic when the signal is weak, they just add noise. When the signal becomes stronger, they try to attenuate the signal, they try to weaken it. And Tiffany, your signal is growing in strength, and it's important for people who are watching us right now to help you to continue doing that. And the best way to do it is to visit TiffanyFitzHenry.com or to visit Tiffany's Patreon site and become a sponsor on there, patreon.com/Tiffany FitzHenry. People can also visit patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become sponsors there. We can't bring this kind of information to people, Tiffany, without the support of the viewers. So we're really venturing into a new era of this kind of reporting. You know, first we had live streaming and people were coming out and it was great. You could monetize your YouTube videos and all that sort of stuff. But as people like you quickly learn, when you put out material on these very large companies, these very large individuals who are put in place by powerful people to carry out specific roles, they have a number of ways to attenuate the signal coming from people like you and I. So it's important that the audience help us counteract that. Now, last show we did, you were telling us all about Casamigos. Now, I'm not a big booze drinker, so I didn't even know about this. I had no idea that George Clooney had developed a tequila brand and was the owner of a company that's been sold. Oh, wait, it thinks I can't enter the website. The company's been sold to Diageo, which people may or may not know is the largest distributor of spirits, liquor, in the world. It's a huge multi-billion-dollar company. Give us a little bit of background on this Casamigos situation and why it's something that we're still talking about.
It's so relevant because the more you dig into it, the more you realize how all these players connect. So Casamigos, the board of directors, the chairman of the board, we were just talking about the Century right here. It's already on the screen, how South Sudan government has just dismissed the report of the century, which is George Clooney's NGO. Well, before they even started Casamigos, the chairman of the board of Diageo, who just purchased Casamigos for $1 billion, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
He was sitting on the board of the century. So he was
Mm-hmm.
already on the board. This chairman of the board of Diageo, which eventually bought Casamigos, was already on the board of directors of the century, George Clooney, from years earlier, George Clooney's NGO. We're starting to get a picture of how the world works. And this is like, you're just supposed to think, you're supposed to look at this picture and you're supposed to think, these dudes are just cooler than me. And you know what? They can stumble upon a hangover-free tequila recipe, and gosh darn it, I gotta be happy for him. He made $1 billion. Look at that smile. No, this is all a ruse. And there's these actors like George Clooney, and they're playing this part. And this whole thing is garbage, and I'm so tired of it. I'm tired of the David Geffens sailing around Croatia on their yacht, and the rest of us trying to eke out a living, right? And we're not being laid and lifted and elevated. And yet we're supposed to buy into this crap. We're supposed to buy into this system. And no, what I'm doing and what everyone should do is we should be building outside this system, which is what we're talking about right now. And building not with their permission, making content not with their permission, making this was what was so powerful about Roseanne, was that what she was saying and who she was speaking to, we're like the underserved masses. And that's part of the reason why that whole thing had to get squashed. It's this elite rule, and the elite they say what's said, and they say who gets $1 billion tequila company, and the rest of us should just be happy with our little house and our little mortgage and our little life. And it's such a scam, and it's a sham, and I'm tired of it.
Yeah. But it's important also, Tiffany, to let people know that we're not just railing against famous actors who are making billions of dollars, which people could easily say is, oh, you're jealous or whatever. You now are in receipt of actual statistical data from people who are in the alcohol business who say that this Diageo purchase of George Clooney's Casamigos tequila brand just does not add up when you start to look at the facts, the details, how tequila is made, how liquor brands are valued, and we're going to get into that. What can you tell us about some of the hard facts that you've received?
Well, I've been hearing from some people in this industry, and they are so excited that, again, somebody's talking about this and talking about, hey, wait a minute, because we could all just go, oh yeah, of course George Clooney made $1 billion, like of course, and just move on.
Yeah.
Sounds normal, right? But it's not, and it's not normal in this industry. And one of the things you and I were talking about, which people don't know, is there's a complete agave shortage. You can't make tequila without agave. And for people who talk so much about sustainability, resources, the planet, there is an absolute agave shortage going on. And these people who have contacted me are saying none of this adds up. You actually can't even make enough tequila for the valuation. These valuations of these liquor companies are done based on cases sold. And it's a mathematical formula, and of course you're going to add some value for a celebrity spokesperson, right? A celebrity, that's going to add some value, but there's absolutely no math that adds up to there being enough agave, them being able to make enough sales with enough cases for this $1 billion valuation. Nobody in the liquor industry is buying it. And
right.
I've heard from a lot of them.
Yeah.
And it's just like, wow, there's another layer.
Yeah. This New York Times article about the sale is talking about how the deal values the company at $700 million upfront payment, and there's a sales target for the next decade. So let's just approach this from the standpoint of $700 million and talk about that, because I also spoke to a person who I know who was involved in the development of an absinthe brand here in the United States. It was the first reintroduction of an authentic absinthe recipe in 95 years. This was a brand called Lucid Absinthe that sold for nowhere near $1 billion. It didn't sell to Diageo. People can look it up. I'm not going to discuss the numbers, but it was, less than a tenth, less than, a 20th of this number, way less than that. And, this person said to me, oh, well, George Clooney was associated with it, so that makes sense, and they want the star power and the celebrity endorsement and all that. Now, you were dealing with people who were talking about the actual mathematics of the industry in terms of cases sold. That's hard numbers. And also, I think I'm going to get a warning about an ad blocker from this website, but this is one article about the agave shortage, but this is real. If farmers are having a shortage of the main ingredient of a product, it affects the price of the product, it affects projections for how it will be sold. But the thing that struck me even more was this concept of a $700 million deal and how that would be reflected by a celebrity endorsement. So people can do this. Look around for articles about the largest celebrity endorsements in history, and they are huge for sure. It's hard to know which is the absolute biggest. It looks like A-list stars are easily getting $10 to $20 million for endorsing major national brands and drinks and entire companies. But the biggest one that I was able to find was a $160 million lifetime endorsement deal that was paid, I believe, by Adidas to David Beckham. And David Beckham obviously has worldwide fame. Oh, here we go. George Foreman got $200 million for the grills. That's interesting. Hadn't seen that before. But I think that we start to see that, let's say George Clooney got $200 million. Let's say he got $400 million. It doesn't say that, by the way. It doesn't say that $300 million was for the tequila and $400 million was for a Clooney endorsement. What have your sources told you about what the actual cost would have been expected to be for that kind of a sale?
Much lower, even considering celebrity endorsement. I don't have hard numbers on that. I'm waiting to talk to one of my sources about that, but everyone within the industry is scratching their head because the numbers don't add up, even when you factor it in, but and two, just the farming alone, agave it's one of these plants that takes a long time to mature. So you have to wait years to, harvest and then use the agave to make tequila. So it's not adding up on a lot of levels. And talk about environmental, plundering, right? If you're really planning on being this billion-dollar tequila company, where are you going to get the natural resources to do that? They're not going to come from Mexico because there just aren't enough. And is it anything for money? Will you sell as much tequila as you possibly can, no matter what it does to the earth? These are good questions for people like George Clooney.
Absolutely. Maybe he'll come on the show and we could ask him. I doubt it.
Agree.
Now, I'm pulling this up on the fly, so perhaps it'll make us look stupid, but this is the New York Times deal book talking about Diageo, the liquor distributor, owner, whatever that we're talking about. So Diageo and Cuervo in 2014 did a brand swap for this Bushmills whiskey. They swapped Bushmills whiskey for Don Julio tequila. I believe Don Julio is a pretty premium brand. This is telling us that Diageo and the family that makes Jose Cuervo tequila. I did a 3D production for Jose Cuervo at one point many years ago. I think it's like a 100-year-old brand or something like that, where the great-grandfather was making tequila in his basement 100 years ago, and it's a recipe developed over time, handed down from families in Mexico. Not three rich guys who were getting drunk in Italy and decided they could make a better deal. But it does look like...
And did it in 4 years. In 4 years, had a billion-dollar company.
Right. They had just created it. So, but this deal, Diageo acquired full control of Don Julio from Casa Cuervo, as well as $408 million in cash. So Diageo acquired $408 million from Casa Cuervo. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Wait a minute now. Diageo will acquire full control as well as 408. So,
I'm not sure, but it's like you talk about like the Bronfmans, right? That goes back to Nexium, and I think that there's been a lot of different money laundering scams going on this planet, and there's been a lot of different people at the top of industries, like media, like alcohol, and a lot of these things have been run like a mob system,
right.
just like Hollywood has been run like a mob system. So I don't expect that this is any different. It's just like how we're finding out that these charities and these foundations and these NGOs are used as celebrity slush funds.
Yeah.
These are things that we didn't know in a tangible way just a couple years ago. But now it's all making so much sense. And it's just like, what are we going to do about it? That's the main thing. How are we going to shine a light on it? And how are we going to, really level the playing field between the elite and the non-elite so that we don't have this system over us?
Yeah. I think just letting people know about it so that they're aware of what's going on is the first step. I don't want to get too fixated. Sorry?
Certainly don't drink his tequila. Let's start with that.
Right, and that's a decision for people to make. I wouldn't drink it, and actually I was out to dinner with Mike Moore the other day. People might have seen the video that he and I did where we were trying to interview disgraced FBI liar and coward Andrew McCabe after he ducked us by deploying an array of distraction countermeasures. We went out to dinner and Mike ordered a Casamigos tequila. I was like, are you crazy? And so he switched it, I think, to Don Julio, to tell you the truth. So it takes me back to this article in the New York Times, which is telling us that Don Julio, a well-established brand, sells $168 million worth of tequila per year. So now, Don Julio, how old is that brand? I feel like that's one of these 100-year-old things.
And there was this formula that I was sent by one of these executives, and they sent me a formula for how the valuations of these companies have been done. And it's based on cases per year that they sell and all of this. I have to try to pull that up. But yeah, I'm going to have more information on this coming out because I am talking to a lot of different people across both the Sudan issue and also regarding this $1 billion, sale.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's,
Do you think needs to be judged?
Sorry?
He also has a coffee company. He started a coffee company in Sudan.
Really?
And I think people should really, and I think that people should really dig there. I think from what I'm hearing, there's a lot to find having
Absolutely.
to do with different things that we've been learning about, and maybe even a connection to Epstein having to do with this. But
wow.
I don't want to say too much about it. But
not to interrupt, Tiffany, but look at this. So Wikipedia tells us that Don Julio is a brand of tequila produced in Mexico. It is the largest brand in value and the 8th largest in volume. So that's pretty interesting because if it's the largest brand in value and it's selling $168 million worth of tequila per year, it definitely seems like a huge purchase price for George Clooney's tequila brand. I don't know how in 3 years, even with George Clooney, I mean, I guess I'm not the target market, but I didn't even know he was selling it. So it's not like this thing has taken the world by storm and every single person has heard of it and is suddenly drinking tequila because it's owned by George Clooney. So that's something for people to look at.
And you start to get the sense that this is money being rewarded for something else.
Right. And certainly that's a well-known tactic used by organized crime where buildings are sold for 5 times more than they're worth and the recipient of the money is being paid for something else, but it's hidden in a building sale. We've heard about how art can be used to do this because, who knows the value of a piece of art? It's just determined by whoever buys it. So I started to look into who is involved in this Diageo company and what are they all about? I mentioned earlier that Roseanne has tweeted some of David Hawkins' shows. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen Discovery CSI with David Hawkins on Fridays on Crowdsource The Truth. But David talks a lot about this company called Serco, which is a huge multi-billion-dollar conglomerate based in the United Kingdom that most people have never heard of, that has contracts with the US government. They created this infamous website for Obamacare and administered all kinds of records from Obamacare, a $1.2 billion contract. They control all the records and everything from the US Patent and Trademark Office. They control air traffic control towers around the world. They control a prisoner transport system, and their truck was driving Julian Assange to prison in the United Kingdom. They were involved in a huge scandal in the United Kingdom where they were charging the British government to transport prisoners that were either dead, not prisoners, not in the trucks. I mean, multi-million-dollar scandal. And David ties them to 9/11 and the horrendous actions of that day in myriad ways. I encourage people to check out those shows. But I started to look around for any potential connections between Diageo and Serco, because they just both seem like these gigantic conglomerates that nobody really knows too much about, or at least the average person doesn't. And I haven't found necessarily any smoking gun type stuff, but I have found a few people who are working at Diageo now who have immediately left really long careers at this company, Serco. So this guy was the head of operational services at Serco for 14 years and 5 months, and for the past 6 years, he's been at Diageo. And it's interesting to note that one of the possible FBI stooges who was trying to thwart Michael Moore and myself when we went to try to interrogate Andrew McCabe told me he was the director of operations of the hotel. I didn't believe that, and he handed me a business card that said he was the food and beverage manager. I think that's just a funny coincidence, but I mean, think about it, Tiffany. Liquor is something that really is not necessary. If we were born on a planet that had no alcohol and nobody had ever seen it, you're not going to die. You know, it's not a nutrient. You don't need it. People enjoy it,
Right.
and you can become addicted to it. It becomes part of a lifestyle, and I'm not knocking alcohol. Using it recreationally is everybody's choice to do, but it's one of these things that, you know, the largest alcohol company in the world, how many deaths are they responsible for in terms of drunk driving and alcoholism and the pain and destruction that that brings to families? So I don't know if this is necessarily the nicest company in the world, but it's interesting to see that there are a number of executives who have gone from Diageo directly to from Serco directly to Diageo. It makes me wonder what sort of unofficial or potentially even official connections there might be between these companies. And I'm not suggesting any wrongdoing on the part of either of them. I am curious to know about this crazy billion-dollar deal that they made with George Clooney. Here's someone who is the EA to Chief HR. I guess it's the executive assistant. So we should look into who the Chief Human Resources person is, because this person was at Serco for 9 years and 8 months and then also went to Diageo. So I've just started to scratch the surface with this, and I know that you probably don't know that much about Serco, but this is an interesting angle to explore and see what, if any, connections exist there. We had identified that the one of the guys on the board at Diageo was like a lord of some kind or something. Do you remember who that was?
Yeah, who was that? Yeah, I think you were looking at the board. Yeah, the board of Diageo.
We'll check it out right
It's just,
now.
to me, part of this system. It's all part of this system. And we've wondered for so long why these people can get away with this stuff, why there's no justice, why there's a two-tier justice system. And you start to realize this web that's been over our world. And, you know, when we start to really pick it apart and we understand it, that's when we can defeat it. And that's when we can say, no, 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 you know, no more of this. Because we see what this is, and everybody's going to spoil their game just by knowing about it. It's just we're going to spoil their whole game. Because
Yeah,
what
and
this is institutionalized crime. I mean, it's just a
exactly.
crime, it's a mob system. It's just a, I discovered in Hollywood that, and you can take one look at Harvey Weinstein and the way he ran Hollywood to understand it was a mob system.
Right.
And I think you could kind of make the argument that that type of system's been over our whole world.
Yeah.
And it's caused all the problems. It's really responsible for, because I think that people are good. People want to create. People want to make their communities great. People want to do a craft or do a thing where they make something amazing and sell it to the people in their community. Or, we're not like down for all of this stuff that's been going on our planet. And now that we're finding out how it's all worked, it's really, there's going to be hell to pay, in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
Now, Tiffany, here's this guy, Lord Davies of Abersock, who is on the board of directors of Diageo. He also seems to be part of the British Parliament. I personally really object to this concept of people being in government and big business at the same time. I don't know why they're allowed to do that, but it certainly seems like if there's a way for this guy to get involved in doing something with the law that might benefit Diageo, he'd be motivated to do that. I mean, this is like a congressman being on the board of directors for some military company. Like, what if
Or
someone,
Monsanto, right?
what's that?
Or Monsanto,
Right.
or
Let's,
Monsanto,
what
which we
if,
have. We have.
what if someone decides that there's a big problem with drunk driving in England and they want to raise the age from 18 to 21? I personally don't object to that. I think there is some statistical data to show that in the United States, when they raised the drinking age, drunk driving accidents went down. But I don't think this guy would be too motivated to vote for legislation like that because he likes making money selling booze to people. So that represents kind of a conflict of interest at the very least. But I mean, again, we're looking at these connections between international governments, international business. Here we've got this guy, George Clooney. We want him to do something in Sudan. Well, what does British Parliament have to do with Sudan? What interest might England have in plundering African countries that are just 7 years or 8 years into having a government? It's not a very established country. I doubt they have a very organized government, organized military, but I bet they have a lot of natural resources there in Africa. And I wonder if the British government or Serco or Diageo or a company like that might have some interest in gaining some political influence in Sudan.
They have a tremendous amount of natural resources in Sudan. I was shocked to find out and understand that their gold reserve, the mining is just skyrocketed in gold, the gold mining, minerals, precious metals, to say nothing of their huge oil reserves, right? And so
Exactly.
what George Clooney is out saying today, yesterday, because of his report that's been refuted by the government of South Sudan, is he's out saying that the UK, which you just said, what is this connection here? The UK needs to join with the US, and we need to put heavy sanctions
Oh,
on the government of South Sudan.
Clooney says that.
Yeah, that's what he's out saying, because based on his report, and it's
Oh.
like, what is really going on here, right? I don't know. I'm not an expert on Africa, but these are the facts. This is what's going on. You can draw your own conclusions. But to me, it looks like this crap we've always seen over and over and over, which is, oh, there needs to be regime change.
Right.
This, but it's always happens to be when countries like Venezuela maybe want to take their own resources for themselves, maybe want, and I know it's a complicated issue because you've got corruption in government, but I really think that we're all in the same boat here on this planet right now, where we're all trying to have sovereignty, and we're in a position where we as Americans are just waking up to the fact that in our name, a lot has been done around the world for the last 100 years. And it's been done with our troops and in our name, but not necessarily having anything to do with us as US citizens at all. And so we have to really say, okay, do we want our government putting sanctions on South Sudan? Because that's what George Clooney is saying.
Right.
should happen. And he's out on CNN. And by the way, he did one interview and it was on CNN.
Of
So this
course.
big report came out yesterday and he did one interview and it was on CNN. And I'm going to post that on my website later on today,
Yeah.
as well as this story about how the government of South Sudan has come out against him. And yeah,
So I think everybody knows that George Clooney is a supporter of Hillary Clinton, but I mean, again, it's an interesting format for a show where we just sort of pick a topic and we're digging into it in real time, because it looks like George Clooney has been hanging out with Hillary Clinton for years. Look at how much younger they both look here and here. Oh, he's got a 9/11 pin. What's he got there? What's he wearing? What does that say? I don't know what he's got. But
I don't know what that is. They've
this,
always got their little pauses and their little junk.
right. And of course,
I find
Tiffany,
it so hilarious.
we've spoken a bit about how George Clooney's wife, Amal Clooney, was a lawyer for WikiLeaks, and she actually objected to the notion of them releasing these John Podesta emails, which of course were extremely damaging to the Hillary Clinton campaign. I believe she left the representation of WikiLeaks after they did that. So it causes me to wonder, was she in there as a lawyer trying to help them, or was she in there as a fixer trying to make sure that they weren't releasing anything too damaging to people that they're there to protect?
You know, you can draw a conclusion on that. This is somebody who defended Enron.
Right.
So I mean, this is how this whole global system has worked.
Did she defend them or did she prosecute them? It actually doesn't matter, because prosecuting them, it went nowhere, and defending them, why would you defend those? I mean, they need a lawyer, but it doesn't look good either way.
Right. I think she was on the defense,
Wow.
I believe,
Yeah.
what I found.
Oh, and we
But
also
yeah, I mean,
know
you
that-
look at Weinstein right there, and from his very first movie in Hollywood, George Clooney was working with Harvey Weinstein. You can't step foot in Hollywood for 5 seconds and not know over the last 20 years who and what Harvey Weinstein was. So if you're making movies with him, you know exactly who he is. You know exactly how all this works. And he eventually came out, and said, oh, it's despicable, you know, the way he treated women and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I happen to think this whole thing is partly a distraction, because there is such deeper problems and there are such sicker problems having to do with children, not just sexual abuse of women, but children. And so the whole Clooney, you know, the whole Weinstein thing, I'd like to, you know, get behind it and say, yeah, he's done all these things and he did them at, you know, as he's working for Disney, right? And that's a huge thing. And we're starting to see some of these actresses that he sexually assaulted and raped go after Disney, which is what they should all be doing. But we also need to be talking about what's happening in Hollywood with the children. And that's what I think the noisy Harvey Weinstein story a little bit prevents the public from doing. It's like, oh yeah, I sexually abused all these women. Great, that's true. And sleeping with him was part and parcel required to become the star of Divergent. And he said as much, that he bragged about sleeping with Jennifer Lawrence. And, you know, for all of these years, Harvey Weinstein was coronating these it girls. It was, you know, you went and you were in a Miramax movie and then won your Oscar. But what was that all really about? Is it part of this mob system? But also the kids. We need to be talking about the kids and what goes on, because I think that's the story they don't want us talking about.
Right. Right. So here's this article from Hello magazine. I'm not very familiar with that. I think maybe it's British. George Clooney slams Harvey Weinstein following sexual harassment claims. You know, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. To slam him, it's like, look, if someone's going to at least be honest, they could say something along the lines of, hey, it was known that Harvey Weinstein had a casting couch, but I didn't really know the extent of it, and everybody looked the other way, so it was the wrong thing to do, but I was just going along with what everybody was doing, you know? I don't say that that's an
Yeah.
excuse, but I think that that's probably what drove most people, is that this was just accepted. I mean, look, I was on the set of Spider-Man, and the assistant director excoriated the script supervisor and called her something that I won't say on air, that if a man said to a woman in an office that wasn't a movie set, he would absolutely be sued, fired. Like, I was kind of shocked. But I mean, that was 10 years ago, so pretty recent. And I'm sure you've seen this. There was a lot of kind of, that's abuse. What he said to this woman, he embarrassed her in front of everyone, but nobody said anything, including me.
Yeah, well, you don't want to lose your place, right? Because it's a closed power system, and that is the game. And that is where the silence comes from. And that is every reason why I spoke out, because who's going to?
Yeah.
Who will go? Nobody from the inside is going to come out and tell you, because they'll lose their place. And to me, it's about, I don't care, because I want to build something new, because it shouldn't exist the way that it exists. And I don't think Hollywood survives. I genuinely know in my heart that in its current form, the planet is waking up, and particularly in America, we are really waking up. And Hollywood does not get to exist the way Hollywood has existed with us also being awake. So it's not going to survive. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. I mean, nobody's watching the Golden Globes, right? Literally nobody's watching the Emmys. It's become a punchline at this point. And I tweeted about this, but I really feel embarrassed for people who are really buying into it still. It's embarrassing. A funny thing about that, I saw and read that the Kardashians got laughed off stage because they were
At the Emmys?
presenting at the Emmys, and they were talking about just being real people, and like how, the camera is just there and they're just like these real people, and literally the audience is laughing. I mean, it's like a joke within a joke within a joke. The whole thing at this point is just, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
It's not. The illusion is not sustainable. And it's going to be fun to watch it fall.
There was a pretty interesting headline. I still subscribe to Variety, so I read that. They send me emails and stuff. And people who watch Crowdsource the Truth regularly know that I make an effort to point out these very coincidental occurrences of the number 33. And it seems to show up all the time. So there was a surprising 33% decline in the ratings for the Emmys. And I don't know, perhaps that's real, but people should start looking around for that number 33. It's 33,000 emails for Hillary Clinton, 33 people in that Catalina boat accident who died, 33 minors, 33, 33rd degree Mason, etc. So Jesus was 33 years old when he died, which I think is where the Masons get the number from, where all the rest of this comes from. But all I'm saying is I feel like this use of the number 33 is a steganographic marker, where that's a signal being put out to everyone who's reading Variety, where if you know what it indicates, it's telling you something. And there may be more there. We've done a lot of shows on Crowdsource the Truth about how these periodicals and other sort of public things are used to send these coded messages in ways. The Ghislaine Maxwell photo of her at the In-N-Out Burger. Incidentally, while we're talking about Hollywood, if there are people from Hollywood watching, I want to reiterate that In-N-Out Burger sent me, their assistant general counsel sent me a number of letters threatening to sue me and even threatening criminal action for the phone call that I had released where I was asking In-N-Out Burger to provide the closed circuit security footage so that we could confirm if Ghislaine Maxwell was or was not there, so that I could pose the question to the New York Post, why are they publishing this seemingly false story? So In-N-Out Burger was more interested in prosecuting someone acting as a journalist trying to obtain information than they were in pursuing an accused child rapist, child pornographer, accused pedophile. Pretty bizarre.
I mean, more than accused at this point. I mean, I know you're innocent until proven guilty, but if you read the unsealed Epstein documents, and by the way, we're about to get a bunch more. We're about to get a bunch more. And if you're following what's coming out in the still ongoing defamation case that's still ongoing, she's more than just accused. I mean, in these court documents where it's a sworn testimony of Virginia Roberts, the whole thing is laid out, and her role in it as an absolute recruiter and sex trafficker and a child rapist and aiding and abetting countless child rape incidences that are completely in a sworn under oath deposition right there for all of us to read. And so how this person is free right now, how this person is not locked up, I don't know.
Right. And I mean, it's just interesting that In-N-Out Burger was more focused on threatening me. And I told them, I think what I did is totally legal. I'm in the state of New York, where it's a single party recording state. The federal statute is in my favor. I told them I'm ready to test their legal theory in court, and I haven't heard anything else from them. So if a lawsuit comes my way from In-N-Out Burger, viewers can know it's because In-N-Out Burger is jealously protecting the privacy and security of Ghislaine Maxwell to the extent that they want to shut me up and shut me down. It's also interesting that there were 3 articles about an In-N-Out Burger that was just dropped on the street in Queens, including a follow-up with an executive vice president, but no such follow-up with regard to Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, Tiffany, we've got a comment coming in from Periscope. A viewer on there is telling us that the Urban Dictionary is literally their code Bible. And that is super interesting because it takes me back to David Hawkins, who had identified in the Urban Dictionary this term Mendenhall. I'm really excited to now be hosting a show with you here on Crowdsource the Truth, because I want to introduce you to David Hawkins and get you onto his show or him onto your show so we can share some of this knowledge and build on it and find out some more about any possible connections between Diageo and Serco and some of the international dealings that are going on. We're getting close to the end of our first show, Tiffany. Was there anything else you felt we should cover before we end it today?
Well, just that, I'm going to post another article today on TiffanyFitzHenry.com there and update everybody on this. I just think it's important as Americans that we stop being blinded. We stop being in the illusion. So much of this system that we're all trying to take down has been created and propped up by us as Americans being asleep. And by us as Americans being asleep and able to be hypnotized by these celebrities. So as long as we consent to everything, everything kind of goes on around the world. We have an incredible amount of power as Americans, but we have to be completely awake. We have to be completely savvy to all of these tricks. And I don't know everything about what's going on in Sudan, in South Sudan, in Darfur, but I'm studying it. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm talking to a lot of people. And I'm going to be, like I said, publishing an article updating everybody today on the fact that the government of South Sudan has come out today against George Clooney and against this report that he's putting out. And I just want us to be paying attention as Americans and going, do we want to put sanctions on South Sudan? Because that's what, they're really talking about this, but they talk about it in this way that it's being done in our name.
Yeah.
So we need to be vocal about what we want, because do we want sanctions being put against this country, this brand new country? I don't know. I'm not sure. And so this is something that I'm going to be following and just going to be trying to educate people on, because for too long we've seen these movies that these celebrities have made in conjunction with the Pentagon, right? And these movies being starred in by these people who are sitting on the Council on Foreign Relations, right, who are advocating for all this stuff around the world, and our troops are dying, killing themselves 22 a day. What's going on is that we are fighting things and we are losing our lives, and we are sending our children to go fight battles that don't make any sense. And they don't make any sense when it comes down to it, because it doesn't make any sense to begin with, from what we're told. And it's people like George Clooney who are selling this lie. And I want Americans to start paying attention, but paying attention to the right stuff, educating ourselves on this illusion and waking up to say, you know what? I don't have any problem with the government of South Sudan. Let them be. Let them have their own gold. Just back off. The West should just back off or whatever it is. You know what I mean? But we need to be educated on this because for far too long, we've just been absolutely blinded, and all of this has been able to go on and go on in our names, most of it.
Yeah. It's interesting to contrast the article that you shared from the Sudan Tribute to an article from 2 days ago on CNN where George Clooney is making a call for action in South Sudan. Why is he calling? The action he should be calling for is on a movie set and nothing more. I'd be fine with George Clooney transitioning from actor to director, but actor to disruptor of South Sudan, I'm not sure that he should be doing that or that he's giving us the full picture. This sounds like another one of these destroy the country and take everything they've got kind of deals. So we'll have to see what happens there. I think we're going to have to get Charles Ortel involved with looking into some of this as well, because these NGOs I generally do not trust. So Tiffany, with that, I think we're going to wrap up our premiere show here today. I'm going to remind everybody to visit tiffanyfitzhenry.com for updates, articles about some of the things that we've been talking about today and more. There's plenty of material there on tiffanyfitzhenry.com. And the most important thing is for people to visit Tiffany's Patreon page and become a sponsor on patreon.com/Tiffany FitzHenry. I hope that people will also sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by going to patreon.com/Crowdsource the Truth or subscribestar.com/Crowdsource the Truth. There's a tremendous amount of sponsor exclusive content on there, including the video last night of More Pain with Mike Moore of True Pundit, where we attempted to speak with disgraced FBI jackass Andrew McCabe. Didn't quite work out, but it's an entertaining video nonetheless. Tiffany, we'll see you back here next week. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for watching, everybody.